There's a trend in esports analysis. If you've been watching some of my talk shows the last few weeks, you'll notice it's kind of one that I've been on and have been thinking about, mulling it over my brain, and now it's time for the video. And it goes like this. It's in both CSGO, it's in League of Legends, in every esport, let's be real, especially every team game particularly. And so I'll use examples from both games and we'll go in between. And by the way, if you don't know one game or the other, you'll see from how I'm making the point about one, maybe how it infers what happens in your game. So... when someone is analysing a team or a star player's performance, they tend to, unfortunately, in this phenomenon, remove the context of who the player is, what the team is, and just judge the player and use this logic. Instead of looking at how well he played or did he do enough or what was he supposed to, they just go, well, he didn't do that much that was bad. So basically, like, he isn't bad or he wasn't bad or he's just fine. They don't instead say, well, was he playing well? Is he supposed to play well? Is he supposed to carry? And this tends to be used as a way to downplay lesser performance. So it could justify a player not being removed from a team because they might say, but he isn't the worst on the team or he isn't the lowest performer, ignoring what his role is, ignoring his history, ignoring who the team is. And outright, it suggests that this player or this team just aren't an issue. Because they're not the worst, because they're fine, because they're okay, because there's other people worse, other people in their team worse, it's okay. They don't need to remove, they're not an issue. But that ignores all the important context around the player and the team as far as I'm concerned. So to me, the questions that you ask about a player are, is the player performing well or bad relative to his own historical form, his own performances, whether he is good relative to who the team needs, who they could get, who the team themselves are, and who's available as a result. I mean, I made this point years and years ago, but it still stands. When everyone is good, when everyone's fine, then nobody is. Because you have to have a bottom end to the scene. These are pro players, not just random people playing the game. Yes, of course, everyone in LEC is fine compared to me at League of Legends. Everyone in G2 last year was fine compared to me at CSGO. But G2 aren't comparing performance against Thorin, are they? They're comparing it against who they could get and what they are trying to accomplish and who the player was to know whether he's good enough. So in League of Legends, right now we have a perfect example. In Mad Lions, the team that are the two-time reigning champions of the LEC, but had to sell, I don't know if they had to, but just relative to where the org was, I believe they probably did need to. I think this player wanted to leave, and I imagine he was going to get paid more in Fnatic than in Mad Lions. So they left. They had their star player, Humanoid, leave the team, and so in his place, just as the org has 2 times previously with Mad Lions, they went to the ERLs, they took out some talent, and they tried to make it work in the LEC. And whereas for the last 2 seasons it worked, it didn't really work this time around. And so they brought in Reeker, this mid laner from I think it was the Prime League, right? It was the German league. And he came in as a hyped rookie. If you go and watch the LEC pop quiz thingamajig that I'll link, he is far and away the player, the other big names, or the names questioned in LEC, expected to win the Rookie of the Split award. He was replacing the aforementioned Humanoid, who was one of the best mids in the West and the 2-time reigning champion of the LEC. But Reeker himself, after this split, is neither the best rookie, nor one of the best mids, nor close to the best player in Mad Lions. And so as a result, it's terrible. He wasn't a star in Mad Lions. He lacked many of the qualities that Humanoid had. Even though, remember, he plays mid, the most influential role in the history of League of Legends and the region, Europe, and still a very influential role. Think about it. 2 of the 3 main MVP candidates for this split are mid laners, as you'd expect. They're obviously Vetio from Misfits and Larson from from Rogue. Obviously, most people would have Halasang for Fnatic as the 3rd one. Now, look, I will say, in light of what I'm going to talk later about teams, sure, the Mad Lions organisation, they're not the biggest org, and they're certainly not one that has a history of signing big-name free agents. So, yes, you wouldn't expect them to be able to replace Humanoid with a player just as good or as valuable. That was kind of found money, even getting him into Splice years ago. But you know what? That's not who Reeker's compared against. He's not just compared against Humanoid. He is contextually, but if you look at who's available, you can also say he wasn't good enough in the sense that this could have been Niski, who would be a fantastic addition. This could be Jensen, who could probably be one of the better laners. This could be Jizuki, who could define your whole team and be this roaming mid. So you think about this, like, there really were other options. Like, it is fine to say Reeker didn't do a good enough job. Reeker maybe should have replaced. Reeker maybe never should have been. You can say all of these things. It's not like, but he was just fine. But he wasn't the main reason they lost all the games. But he didn't in that many games. Yeah, he just had a million games where he got 1 or 2 kills and just played average as fuck, or below. No, let's be real. Below average for a mid laner in LEC. But on a team that's the reigning champions, guys, admittedly with a different lineup. Then you go into CSGO. Probably the worst area I see this is when the superstar players, the players who contend each year for potential number 1 on that HLTV top 20 list, just have like a game where their stats are just the equivalent of just an average pro. So with that whole HLTV 2.0 rating, like around a 1. I think they actually said it was 1.05, but around a 1.0, it's supposed to be like the average rating. But that's for all pros that play on their service. So here's the problem. If NiKo or ZywOo have a 1.00 game, probably they had one of the worst games of their careers. Probably they fucked up. Probably they weren't good enough relative to who NiKo and ZywOo are. Remember, they aren't just even good players. They're superstar players. They have the roles and the resources most of their careers to be the best player, not just on their team, in that server against anyone, and potentially in the whole world. So guess what? A 1.00 from NiKo or ZywOo won't get it done. That ain't the way the team's been constructed. That's not what you expect from them. That's not what their historical form, the context of their career, their body of work suggest. That is a terrible performance for them, even if for many other players, even in top 10 teams, that's an okay performance. That is fine if you're Jax and you do that. That is probably fine if you're Magisk and you have a game like that. Yeah, you can probably get away with that time to time. Not if you're NiKo or ZywOo, because we're judging them to a different standard. Then back in League of Legends right now, one of the all-time best players in LCS is back in the LCS. It's Bjergsen, but he now plays for Team Liquid instead of TSM. Now, you've seen, just like old Brady when he went to the box, loads of those plastic fans have just followed him, right? From TSM to Team Liquid, and his nut huggers are all over the fucking place. And they're talking now again like he's some relevant star player in the LCS. Spoiler, guys, go watch. He is nowhere near his prime form. Spoiler, his prime form was like, if I'm being generous, season 7, he still had it. By the way, that was 5 years ago, guys. And then on top of that, he's just had a whole year off the game where he actually straight up retired and became a coach. I don't care how much solo queue he played. So he ain't even the best player on Team Liquid. Never mind best mid in the LCS. So then when people see, you see it all the time in the Reddit threads, like, yeah, but he doesn't need to carry on this team when he's got Bwipo and Hansama gapping their lanes. Yeah, but on this team, like, he can play a supportive champion because like the comp will... Then he's not the carry, is he? Then he's not the star player. Then he's not the best mid laner, is he? Think it through. Like in this scenario, you can like the player. The player can in the past have been good. You can just give it up that he ain't that good now. And that in this scenario, by the way, a real relative question that could obviously be asked about Bjergsen goes like this. Team Liquid had the option to have Jensen again. So in that world, as far as I know, did Jensen last year play better than Bjergsen plays now? Yes, absolutely. Especially bearing in mind in the summer when people are going to get a few dodgy games. Oh, you mean we didn't have his real team and the coach was going fucking nuts and I was having behind the scenes to pull Game of Thrones level shit to get the motherfucker fired? Give me a break. Like, that's outrageous. Jensen right now, I'm willing to bet, would be better at the moment as a mid laner for TL than Bjergsen is. Sure, Bjergsen might be elsewhere in the league, which might be TL's concern, but TL could potentially have amazing star mid and all the rest of the team they've got. So I think this is whack as fuck to take that angle. Then back in CSGO, how about a whole team? Remember last year when G2 was like 3rd or 4th most of the year. NiKo was like pretty good, but probably just like a top 10 player for most of the summer. Then they went to autumn through to winter, and they became one of the best teams in the world. Now they were probably like number 2 team. I know by the end of the land it was Vitality, but around the major period, they were number 2, number 3. They were definitely in the mix at that point in time. And obviously NiKo was contending with Simple and ZywOo and all these amazing players for the top of the standings, right, with the stats by the end of the year. But here's the problem. I used to tell everyone, the most obvious player you got from this team's Nexa, right? Go watch my videos. Because here's the problem. His role in this team ended up having to be 3rd best fragger and be the IGL. And you know what? As a 3rd best fragger, he was okay. And as a IGL, yeah, he was decent. But here's the problem. That ain't good enough for G2. That ignores that G2 is one of the biggest orgs in the world and has one of the best players ever in CSGO, who a lot of people in theory should want to play with in NiKo. So that means they could have gotten a world-class IGL, as they have now done, in my opinion, in Alexi B. They had one of the hardest star carries in the world, so they were ready-made to win at that point. They could have won that major, but they didn't have the best possible lineup. So guess what? It didn't happen, and I can't believe they could have won the major last year. They could have won titles last year. They could have had an era if they had some of these key pieces. Instead, they won no lands. And so, was it just fine? When you watch them at Katowice and you see what Monacy does, and you see how Lexi B's changed again, do you really go, oh, bloody hell, I wish Amanek and fucking Nexo? But who does? Who does except Nexo and fucking Amanek? Then let's go into League of Legends again. What about Broxer in Fnatic? Not in Season 8, obviously. We're talking about in Season 9 and Season 10, aren't we? When all my analysts on my shows used to tell people, this guy is not only not one of the best junglers in LEC, he isn't even like top half at times. Like he's arguably mid-table, or at times, depending on the meta, bottom half jungler, but he plays for the second or third best team in the league. So again, people's logic was, cause in LEC, that was fine because you had fucking, I mean, at this era, you had Nemesis, and you had Bwipo, and you had Illusang, and you had Reckless. You still had a whole bunch of good players, and you were still competing. You were still right up there with G2. People were like, it's fine. As though they were going to go to Worlds, and he was going to smurf like he did some of the games in Season 8. Like, it's so delusional. Because what they lacked for in that team when Caps left was a decisive jungler. Someone who understood the game and could control it. Imagine that team if they'd actually had a jungler like that. Oh, my lord. Instead, they had this guy who, as far as I can tell, had to be told what to do all the time. He didn't really get the game, and his feel for it was completely off. He had to be band-aided. I always say this. There's times where fucking Bwipo ran from top lane to bot lane, acting like some sort of pseudo jungler instead of fucking Broxer doing it. Like, it's ridiculous. By the way, if you don't think Gamersops is a delicious sugar-free energy drink that would be considered a nice alternative for whatever your current caffeine source is, then don't buy it. Just do it if you think it's awesome like I do. I personally enjoy the Guacamole Gamer Fart 9000 flavour, despite the name. Obviously, code Thorin, THORIN, 10% off your order at GameSups.gg. Last example I'll give would probably be Loki in Astralis. So if people don't know, Astralis, obviously, were the reigning major champions 3 times in a row coming into PGL Stockholm. They were the best team in history. They'd had an era. They'd won the Intel Grand Slam. They'd set all sorts of records. And they replaced the player device who had the most MVP medals in HLTV.org history with a brand new player who'd never played at Tier 1, never played big lands, and actually had no hype around him that he was the next big talent and some superstar AWPer. On top of that, they're replacing an AWPer, right? Initially at first. Right, first of all, by then not having him as an AWPer, they just didn't have a good AWPer, so they ruined their team. When they had him as an AWPer, he was nowhere near the level of device or the other Tier 1 AWPers. And it's one of the most expensive guns in the game and demands all sorts of additional things around how the team plays around you to make it work. What was people's argument? Yeah, but a couple of these games he's got like a 1.0. Yeah, but in this game, like he won a clutch. Well, you know what? Xyp9x is playing worse. Yeah, but Xyp9x's role is to be the worst player in the team. Yes, he also was playing terribly relative to his role, but you can't compare like for like in that sense. Like, it isn't alike. They're expressly different as players. And in theory, Loki's replacing your best player, the player who's supposed to be the most dominant, and Xyp9x is just playing badly in theory the hardest and the worst role in your fucking team. In general, by the way, AWPers and CSGO skate on this all the time. I saw it with that stuff where people were fine with Smuria's performance in Katowice. What are you talking about? He's supposed to be their best player if they want to make an impact there. AWPers in CSGO, as far as I'm concerned, must be elite and be your best players. And about the only time you can get away with them not being is if you have the absolute most nuts riflers. Like if you had some sort of combo of like Config and fucking, well, if you actually had Config and Magisk at like prime form, yeah, you could maybe get away with just having like a supportive element AWPer. Even then, I don't think you'll be number one. And quite frankly, if you have Config and Magisk at their prime, shouldn't you try and go for number one? Shouldn't you get a device or someone of that kind of try and go for it all? Of course, if it's available, right? So in my opinion, you look at it, the gun itself demands it's played around as a star weapon. The spots they have to give you to be effective mean you are already put in a star position. The resources in terms of people making space for you, people backing you up, people throwing utility for you, people even going into areas, I guess like space creation, the economy, the cost it has on the game, the fact that your team will save when the weapon is available, if in theory you are a good AWPer. Like, these things necessitate that the AWPer be a star player, not just a player on the team using it. It's why I always say the AWP isn't overpowered. So here's the problem, guys. Star players are your best players. They carry. That is their job. They can't just be one of the boys. If they are just one of the boys, then I'll probably need a new star player, even if they're better than some of my other players in non-star roles. Was Nemesis more skilled than Bwipo in Fnatic? You know what, I'd say it's debatable. I'd say maybe he is, actually. But you know what, I think Bwipo was a better player for Fnatic, for his role, and in terms of what the team needed. Is Nexa in last year's G2 better than Jax at CSGO? Yeah, I'd actually say probably almost certainly so. But not relative to the role and what G2 needed and what was going to put G2, the enormous esports org, with a superstar all-time great Hall of Fame player like NiKo, over the line to the success they need. So the issue is star players get resources. They get picks in League of Legends. They get spots in CSGO. They get extra attention in both games. So more is expected of them. Simply not being the worst player isn't even close to enough for these guys. If you're the mid laner or ADC in League of Legends most seasons, if you're the AWPer or a resource-heavy fragger in CSGO, you are supposed to be one of the best, if not the best on your team, and if possible, the best in the server and one of the better teams in your region / the world relative to how big your org, which brings us to the team component of this. Because if you're talking about teams and how good they should be, again, people are using absolutes. So in CSGO, if you go back into 2019, all these people were criticising the ENTS team when they started to slightly fall off, and then obviously when they then made the cuts, right, and the move they made taking out Lacy B, but everyone was just chilling, and there wasn't that much criticism towards FaZe with NiKo, despite the fact not only was ENTS better than FaZe that year, but ENTS is an org that is tiny and has the possibility to get players at the time just from Finland and not pay them very much, quite frankly. So you look at teams and you're asking yourself about economics of the team, talent pool they're drawing from, what starting pieces they have to attract other people, what country did they come from, which is going to tie into some of the aforementioned things, right? So if you are someone like ENTS in 2019 or Big in 2020 or Heroic in 2020, these are some of the biggest overperformers ever in CSGO. These were teams that were either number 1 ranked or top 2 or top 3 in the world, and yet these were budget teams. These were teams that I don't even think would have been top 10 in terms of salary paid, money available for buyouts, talent pool they could potentially draw from, minus Heroic, except Heroic didn't have the money and the option to get people, so maybe it does include them. If you want to go back beyond that, you could go for Mouse Sports in 2017 to 2018. They were way better than they should have been for the money they were paying. There was NA teams that were the 4th best NA team paying like 1.5 or double the salary of those Mouse teams that were winning tournaments internationally, coming to finals, making runs in majors in the playoffs. Then you had teams around a similar era, FaZe Clan with NiKo, you had not with Karrigan obviously, you had the Evil Geniuses teams, you had Cloud9 lineups, you had MIBR. Some of these lineups, when they had the big names, were massively underwhelming in that context. They were paying these guys 25, 30, 40k a month. They were getting boot camps. They had access to talent pools of amazing players, and they were just fucking up and finishing 8th or not even top 10. Give me a break. So again, it's relative to who the team is, who the player is, but actually fine isn't good enough unless, guess what, you're just looking for a team that's going to be fine. Then let's talk about team construction. Think it through, boys. I'll use 2 examples. So in CSGO, let's go with that G2 lineup from last year, right? So here's the team. Superstar carry NiKo, but unfortunately he's not the AWPer. And at the moment, the AWPers seem to get slightly more influence on the game. Zero, Shiro, Simple. I would actually say, by the way, NiKo influences the game more than Shiro, but stats fans are going to say that anyway. Device in the past. Then, so you had a superstar carry. Then you had Hunter, right? I've always thought now actually maybe Hunter's starting to really get it together online. I think he's starting to improve a lot more this last LAN period from the major onwards. Now he's starting to look like he could be a legit second carry or something. For me, I always thought he was more in the third mix for most of the time. So then we go to our AWPer. Well, our AWPer's fucking Amanek, a support AWPer, so we're already in big trouble right there. Okay, we got Jax, he's okay, but we can't have Jax and Amanek. And then Nexa, he better be a great IGL if we're already working with some like compromise. But oh, he's not actually even that good. He's not good at either aspect. Now, all of a sudden, guys, here's the team you've got. Amanek, I mean, he's fine if the rest of the team's good. Jax, I mean, he's fine, I guess, if the rest of the team's good. Nexa, I mean, I guess he's fine if the rest of the team's good. Hunter, he's fine, but relative to his role, he's maybe a slight bit not as good, but he is pretty good. As the rest of the team. There's only one player left! And then I'm going to take that team. Fine relative to his role. Really good. I'm going to take 4 players that are fine relative to their role. And then I'm going to go and beat Naviama, where they're getting 3 or 4 players in like the top 10 rating of a tournament for fragging. I'm going to go and beat Heroic with a nice balanced squad and amazing rotations. I'm going to go beat all these Vitality with Ziwu and some veterans. I'm probably not, am I? Because the team ain't good enough. Same as in Vitality. They could make second and third in the world. They could win tournaments, Thorin. Yeah, and you know what? That's because of Ziwu. Once you took Ziwu out, again, like Apex, yeah, pretty good for his role. Masuta, I mean, I guess he's fine if the rest of the team. Shocks, I mean, I guess he's fine if... Kyojin wasn't fine at all. Like, you see what I mean there? Like, you can't have a team like that where there's just a bunch of players that are just okay, because at the end, your team's just going to be okay, isn't it? Or it's going to be super carried by one player. You're going to pretend the team was all right and the construction was acceptable. No, your bitch ass as a GM didn't do shit. That star player's what got you in that position, mate. Look at Aaron Rodgers and the fucking Packers rosters the last few years. They don't even have any business getting near a conference final.
Hello, this is NiKo, just an average CSGO player, and you're watching Thorin's YouTube channel.